Alexa. Everybody in here.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to take a couple minutes and let people flow in. And if you want to introduce yourself, I'll start. I'm Jen, and I use she, her pronouns. And I am working on tonight my native B, which getting there each week. And I will pass it to Lauren. Oh, you're muted, Lauren.
I'm Lauren, she, her pronouns, and I will be continuing to work on my Lupin. Passing it to Sylvia.
Hello, I'm Sylvia Holmes. I'm in Pasadena, California. I'm working on mule fat, and I think I'll be done tonight.
Wow. Oh, wow.
So I was wondering what I'm going to work on next week.
We can send something new out to you.
All right, I'll send this in. Thanks.
I'm Cindy. I'll just go since I'm
thanks.
muted. I'm Cindy, she, her pronoun, and I am working on my little butterfly that I haven't gotten very much further, but I'm working slowly on it. Let's go with Emily.
Hi, Emily here in Echo Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. She, her pronouns. And I'm going to be working just on deep listening to the reading and deep reading of the reading. Let's see, Rochelle, have you introduced yourself, Rochelle?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rochelle. She, her, but I also like she. Excellent. And I'm working my avocado tonight in Marina Del Rey. And sorry, I'm late to the Zoom. Rowena, have you gone?
Hi, I haven't gone. I'm Rowena Koenig, she, her pronouns. I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm working on the native bee. Lee, have you gone?
Hi, I'm Lee Adams. I'm in Altadena. I use she, her pronouns, and I finished my mule fat and my bear poppy, and I'm taking a break and enjoying the reading very much. Caroline.
Yes, good evening. I am Caroline, and I use she, her pronoun. I am from Studio City, and I will be reading tonight, listening and embroidering a little bit here and there. I'll pass it to Nance. Did you go already?
Hi, I'm Nancy, and I'm calling in from Northwest Illinois near the Mississippi River and the Wisconsin border. And I'm making pinch pots instead of ordering because I just don't have the ability to focus so carefully. So I'm just going to grab clay.
I'll go next. My name is Millie. I'm calling from Glassell Park, Los Angeles, one of the neighborhoods in Los Angeles, and I'm currently drawing and cleaning out my personal seed. Let's see. Lexa, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm in Pennsylvania. She, her. I got the book from the library, and I'm working on sunflowers with a butterfly, a pollinator. I don't see the list of who's next, so somebody should just say hello.
Hi, I'll go next. Dorena Holland. calling in from Baldwin Hills. I go by she, her pronoun. I am working on a sunflower, but tonight I'm just going to listen in. My connection's kind of scratchy tonight, so I'll be listening in. And I can't see really who is on, so if you haven't gone, please go. Thanks.
I think at this point, everyone has gone, and I'm going to stop it. If you didn't go, you can introduce yourself after the end of the reading. So it looks like the entering in of to this has stopped, so we'll start. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fires of the West Learning and Native Plant Embroidery Zoom gathering hosted by the Metabolic Studio. Since the last presidential election, Lauren Bond and the Metabolic Studio have held a potluck protest printmaking workshop and community crafting every Thursday to process collectively the various traumas of this time. With the advent of COVID-19 pandemic, however, we have shifted gears and created this Zoom space to educate ourselves on critical issues by reading and holding discussions while we craft. We spent the first 12 weeks of the Zoom gathering focused on texts about prison and police abolition. This current series is dedicated to educating ourselves about the fires of the West with a specific focus on native land management and sovereignty, the history of fire suppression, and how we can decolonize our understanding of fire moving forward to create a safer and more resilient West. Many of you already have received your embroidery kits in the mail. If you haven't, they will be coming soon. In this kit is a line drawing on fabric of a botanical plant representing the food and medicine that Metabolic is currently growing on 2 studio sites along the LA River and up in Payahunadu, so-called Owens Valley, where Los Angeles steals its water from, and in Vermont as an effort to give away free food to folks in need right now. We drew the images of the plants we're growing, transferred the drawings onto fabric, which we sent to you, along with an embroidery hoop, needles, and thread. In this kit, you will have also received a self-addressed return envelope with postage. When you finish your embroidery, you can use it to mail back to the Metabolic Studio. These embroideries will eventually be formed into a hybrid object. If you have not yet received an embroidery kit, please put your name in the chat and we will be in touch with you. Or you can, Cindy will put in the chat bar as well, our info email address. And you can reach out to us there as well. Tonight, we'll read the chapter Season of Smoke from the book On Fire, The Burning Case for a Green New Deal by Naomi Klein, published in 2019. We decided to close entrance to the Zoom space after the first 15 minutes of the reading to create a better flow for discussion at the end. For anyone who would like to read the text with us, please put your name in the chat and feel free to unmute yourself and let us know. I am going to share this reading. So I'll share my screen so we can all read along as well. Do that. Make sure. Okay. Wait, it didn't share it. Hold on, let me try again. Take 2. Okay. Can everybody see that? Let me just. Actually, I can't hear anybody, so.
I can see the screen.
Can you read it?
Yes, it's readable.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that you can read it so we can follow along if you'd like. Okay. Season of Smoke. It begins to strike me how precarious it all is, this business of not being on fire. September 2017. The news from the natural world these days is mostly about water, and understandably so. Yeah, okay. We hear about the record-setting amounts of water that Hurricane Harvey dumped on Houston and the Gulf cities and towns, mixing with petrochemicals to pollute and poison on an unfathomable scale. We hear too about the epic floods that have displaced hundreds of thousands of people from Bangladesh. Oh, sorry, to Nigeria, although we don't hear enough. And we are witnessing yet again the fearsome force of water and winds of Hurricane Irma, one of the most powerful storms ever recorded, leaves devastation behind in the Caribbean, with Florida now in sight. Yet, for large parts of North America, Europe, and Africa, this summer has not been about water at all. In fact, it's been about its absence. It's been about land so dry and heat so oppressive that forest mountains explode into smoke like volcanoes. It's been about fires fierce enough to jump the Columbia River, fast enough to light the outskirts of Los Angeles like an invading army, and persuasive enough to threaten natural treasures like the tallest and most ancient sequoia trees and Glacier National Park. For millions of people from California to Greenland, Oregon to Portugal, British Columbia to Montana, Siberia to South Africa, the summer of 2017 has been the summer of fire. And more than anything else, it's been the summer of ambiguous, inescapable smoke. For years, climate scientists have warned us that warming world is an extreme world, one in which humanity is buffeted by both brutalizing excesses and stifling absence of the core elements that have kept fragile life in the equilibrium for the millennia. And at the end of the summer of 2017, with major cities submerged in water and others licked by flames, we are currently living through Exhibit A of this extreme world, in which natural extremes come head to head with social, racial, and economic ones. Fake weather. Wait, I'm not sure why it's not turning. Oh wait, sorry about that. I checked the forecast before coming to the British Columbia Sunshine Coast, a ragged strip of coastline marked by dark evergreen forests that butt up against the rocky cliffs and beaches strewn with driftwood, the charming flotsam from decades of sloppy logging operations. Reachable only by ferry or float plane, this is the part of the world where my parents live, where my son was born, and where my grandparents are buried. Though it still feels like home, we now get here for only a few weeks a year. The Government of Canada Weather site predicted that the next week would be glorious, an uninterrupted block of sun, clear skies, and higher than ever temperatures. I pictured hot afternoons paddling in the Pacific and still starry nights. But when we arrived in early August, a murky blanket of white has engulfed the coast, and the temperature is cool enough for a sweater. Forecasts are often wrong, but this is more complicated. Somewhere up there, above the muck, the sky is clear of clouds. The sun is particularly hot. Yet intervening in these truths is a factor that forecasters did not account for. High quantities of smoke blown up to 400 miles from the province's interior, where about 130 wildfires are burning out of control. Enough smoke has descended to turn the sky from periwinkle blue to this low, unbroken white. Enough smoke to reflect a good portion of the sun's heat back into space, artificially pushing temperatures down. Enough smoke to transform the sun itself into an angry pinpoint of red fire surrounded by a strange halo, unable to burn through the relentless haze. Enough smoke to blot out the stars. Enough smoke to absorb any possible sunsets. At the end of this day, the red ball abruptly disappears, only to be replaced by a strange burnt orange moon. The smoke has created its own weather system, one powerful enough to transform the climate, not just where we are, but in the stretch of territory that appears to cover roughly 100,000 square miles. And the smoke, a giant smudge on the satellite images, respects no borders. Not only is it about a third of British Columbia choked, but so are large parts of Pacific Northwest, including Seattle, Bellingham, and Portland, Oregon. In the age of fake news, this is fake weather, a mess in the sky created in large part by toxic ignorance and political malpractice. Up and down the coast, the government has issued air quality warnings, urging people to avoid strenuous activity. Beyond a certain threshold, particulate matter in the air is officially unsafe, bad enough to cause health problems. The air in parts of Vancouver is 3 times above the safe threshold, with some smaller communities on the coast significantly worse off. Elderly people and other sensitive populations are being urged to stay inside, or better yet, to go somewhere with a decent air filtration system. One local official recommends a trip to the mall. And if somebody wants to take over from Inland Infernos, that'd be great, because I'm starting to lose my voice.
I will, Jen. Inland Infernos.
Okay,
At the epicenter of the disaster, where the flames are closing in, the air quality is far worse. Anything over 25 micrograms of fine particulates per cubic meter is considered unsafe. Kamloops, the city currently housing many of the evacuees, averages 684.5 micrograms per cubic meter. That rivals Beijing on some of its very worst days. Airlines cancel flights, and people suffering from breathing problems pack emergency rooms. Since this disaster began, some 840 separate fires have ignited, forcing at this point some 50,000 people to evacuate their homes, according to the Red Cross. In early July, the government declared a rare state of emergency, and by the time we arrive, it has already been extended twice. Hundreds of structures have been razed, and some whole communities, including indigenous reserves, have been reduced mostly to ash. So far, roughly 1,800 square miles of forest, farm, and grassland have burned. That makes this the second largest fire disaster in British Columbia's history, and it's still going strong, putting the all-time record within grasp. I call a friend in Kamloops. Everyone who can is taking their kids far away, especially the little ones, which puts things into perspective for us on the coast. It may be smoky, but we're damn lucky. It will blow over. Since the new year and the new US administration, I haven't taken a day off, let alone a weekend. Like so many others, I've attended way too many meetings and marched until my feet blistered. I wrote a book in a blur, then toured with it. And my husband, Avi, and I helped start The Leap, a new political organization. Throughout the winter and spring, BC in August was our family mantra. It was the finish line, albeit a temporary one, and we fully planned to collapse on it. It was also the way we kept our 5-year-old son, Toma, in the game. On cold nights in the east, we mapped out the forested walks we would take, the canoe trips, the swims. We imagined the blackberries we would pick, the crumbles we would bake. We listed the grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and old friends we would visit. This break, self-care, in the parlance of my younger coworkers, took on mythic qualities in our home, which may be why I am a bit slow to clue in on the seriousness of the fires and the smoke. On the first day, I'm sure the sun will burn it away by noon. By evening, I announced that it will blow over by morning, revealing at least a glimpse of actual sky. For the first week, I greet each day hopefully, convinced that the drab light peeking through the curtains is just morning mist. Every day, I am wrong. The placid weather forecast that seemed so promising before we traveled turns out to be a curse. Sunny, windless days mean that the smoke, once it is upon us, parks over our heads like an unmovable outdoor ceiling, day after day after day. Should I continue, Jen? 2 pages? My allergies are going nuts. I bathe my eyes in drops and pop antihistamines well beyond the recommended dosage. Toma breaks out in hives so severe he needs steroids. I keep taking my glasses off and cleaning them, rubbing them first with my shirt, then microfiber cloth, then proper glass cleaner. Nothing helps. Nothing makes the smudge disappear. Missing blue. A week into the whiteout, the world begins to feel small. Life beyond the smoke starts to seem like a rumor. At the ocean's edge, we can usually look across the Salish Sea to Vancouver Island. Now we strain to see an outcropping of rock a few hundred feet from shore. I've been on this coast for whole winters when we barely saw the sun. I learned to love the steely beauty, the infinite shades of gray chiseled in the mountains, the low sky and the movement of the mist. But this is different. There's a lifeless quality to the smoke. It just sits there, motionless and monotone. Blankets of smog are something a lot of people on this planet have learned to live with in big polluted cities such as Beijing, New Delhi, Sao Paulo, and Los Angeles. Smoke from wildfires is a little different, in part because you know that you are not breathing pollution from power plants or exhaust from cars, but rather smoke from trees that were very recently alive. You are breathing in forest. I decide that the animals are depressed. The seals seem to pop their heads up in a purely utilitarian fashion just to take a breath and then disappear again beneath the gray surface. They do not play. The eagles, I am convinced, are flying for function, not fun. No soaring or windsurfing. There's little doubt I'm imagining all this, projecting, anthropomorphizing. It's a bad habit. I email a friend in Seattle, a prominent environmentalist, to ask him how he is faring in the smoke. He reports that the birds have stopped singing, and he is mad all the time. At least I'm not the only one. What if we're next? It begins to strike me how precarious it all is, this business of not being on fire. This part of British Columbia, technically a temperate rainforest, is a tinderbox. So far this summer, less than half an inch of rain has fallen. The forest ground cover, usually moist and squishy, is yellow and desiccated and crunches underfoot. You can smell the flammability. The roads are lined with yellow signs announcing a total ban on open fires. Every time we turn on the radio, we hear warnings, increasingly frantic, about open fires, cigarettes tossed out of cars, and fireworks. Would someone like to take over here?
I think if Joan would like to pick up here, that would be great. And then from Joan, we'll go with Millie.
Okay. Fireworks. One guy earned himself a night in jail and over $1,000 in fines after he drunkenly celebrated the fact that his home had survived a brush with fire by setting off fireworks, which could well have set yet another blaze. It's clear that one lightning storm or a couple of careless campers would be enough to send this place up. We've come close before. 2 years ago, a serious wildfire threatened part of the coast about 20 minutes from here, taking the life of a local man who was helping to fight the flames. Yet, despite the years I have spent living here, until this week, I've never really thought about what it would mean if a fire like that ever got out of control. Now I do, and it's unsettling. The Sunshine Coast has a year-round population of 30,000 people served by a single highway that ends in a ferry dock. What the hell does an emergency evacuation look like in a place with no roads out? I ask local friends. They look worried and talk about who has which kind of fishing boat. A death in a blueberry field. 9 days into the whiteout, some terrible news arrives. A farm worker in smoke-choked Sumas, Washington, less than a mile from the Canadian border, has died in a Seattle hospital. Honesto Silva Ibarra came to the United States from Mexico on a temporary H-2A visa to work through the harvest season. He was 28 years old and had been picking blueberries at Sarbanand Farms, owned by California-based Munger Farms, when he started feeling sick. Silva's co-workers blamed his death on unsafe working conditions, long hours, few breaks, insufficient food and drinking water, all compounded by the heavy smoke drifting in from British Columbia. The workers have been overworked, underfed, and have not been hydrated enough, and this has been going on for weeks, said Rosalinda Guillen, director of the advocacy group Community to Community Development. Some workers had fainted on the job, they told reporters. A representative for Munger Farms said that Silva died after running out of his diabetes medication and that heat and wildfire smoke had nothing to do with it. The company also claims it did all it could to save him. Whatever the cause or causes of death, the way the company treated Silva's coworkers when they raised their complaints is a chilling window into just how precarious life can be for America's thousands of guest workers. After Silva was hospitalized, workers staged a one-day strike to demand answers in better conditions. 66 of them were immediately fired for insubordination. They found themselves without means to get home to Mexico and without payment for their final days of work. After setting up a protest camp, marching to the company's offices, and attracting local media, the workers won their back pay, and Munger has, quote, voluntarily offered to provide safe transportation home for all of the terminated workers, unquote, according to the company's spokesperson. But they did not have their much needed jobs back. Munger supplies Walmart, Whole Foods, Safeway, and Costco. North of the border, there are similar reports of temporary farm workers fainting and becoming sick on the job, with smoke apparently playing a role. And advocates point out that rather than being looked after, their sponsoring employers often send sick workers home like defective goods. According to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, at least 10 workers in hot and smoky British Columbia were sent back to Mexico and Guatemala, quote, deemed too ill to work, unquote. A highly divided disaster, as usual. We learn the same lesson over and over again. In highly unequal societies, with deep injustices reliably tracing racial fault lines, disasters don't bring us all together in one fuzzy human family. They take pre-existing divides and deepen them further, so the people who were already getting most screwed over before the disaster get extra doses of pain during and after. We know a fair bit about how that looks during storms like Katrina, Sandy, Harvey, and Irma. We understand less about fire, but that's changing. We know, for instance, that as California struggles with a now endless fire season, the state has become intensely reliant on prison labor, with inmates paid a staggeringly low hourly rate of $1 to do some of the most dangerous work fighting flames. We know that hundreds of South African workers were contracted to help battle Alberta's 2016 Fort McMurray fire, only for them to stop working en masse after discovering that they were being paid significantly less than their Canadian counterparts, and less than press reports claimed they were being paid. They were promptly sent home. We also know, as with floods, that our media give far more coverage to our house pets rescued from wildflowers in the United States and Canada than to the human lives lost because of infernos in, say, Indonesia and Chile. A global 2012 study estimated that more than 300,000 people die annually as a result of the smoke and air pollution from wildfires, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. And in British Columbia this summer, we learned still more about the way inequalities play out against a burning backdrop. Several Indigenous leaders raised concerns that during fire emergencies, their communities do not receive the same level of urgent response as non-Indigenous ones, whether for fighting the flames or for rebuilding afterward. With this in mind, several Indigenous reserves directly threatened by fire refused to evacuate, and a portion stayed behind to fight the flames, some with their own teams of trained firefighters and equipment, others with little more than garden hoses and sprinklers. In at least one case, the police responded by threatening to come in and remove children from the families, words with traumatic reverberations in a country that not so long ago systematically took Indigenous children from their homes. It's a matter of policy. In the end, no First Nations homes were raided, and many were saved because of self-organized fire brigades. Ryan Day, chief of the fire-threatened Bonaparte Indian Band, said, quote, "If we all evacuated, we would have no houses on this reserve," close quote. Pass it on.
Thank you, Joan. A world with two suns. It's almost a week into the smoke out, and the moon is nearing full. Around here, people take full moon seriously. There are drug-fueled dance parties in the forest and late-night kayak excursions taking advantage of the extra light. But when the almost full moon rises in early August, I mistake it. At first, for the sun. It's the same shape and almost the same fiery color. For about 4 days, it's as if we are on a different planet, one with two red suns and no moon at all. Sour fruit. It's week 2 of the smoke out, and the blackberries are finally ripe. We set out to collect them. It feels strange to be going through with this carefree summer ritual with the air so thick and the news so grim, but we do it anyway. Combining hiking with nonstop eating is one of Toma's all-time favorite activities. It's pretty much a bust. With so little rain and such weak sun to warm them, even the ripest berries are sour. Toma quickly loses interest and refuses to try any more. We come home with shin scratches and an empty bucket. We don't stop hiking though. We spend hours every day walking through the stands of moss-covered cedars and Douglas firs, breathing in the super oxygenated air. I love these forests and have never taken their primordial beauty for granted. Now I find myself in near worship, thanking them for not just scrubbing the air or for the shade and the carbon sequestration they provide, ecosystem services, in the lingo of business environmentalism, but for their sheer stamina, for not joining their burning breath in, for sticking with us despite our failings, at least so far. Hello again. I have breathed this smoke before, not these precise airborne particulates, of course, but smoke from many of the same wildfires. And the odd thing is, I've breathed it for some 570 miles east of here in another province entirely. I spent mid-July in Alberta, helping teach a course on environmental reporting on the Banff Center for the Arts and Creativity. This time, too, the forecast had looked perfect, sunny, clear, and warm. This time, too, the forecast was usurped from the first day by smoke cast, a haze that obscured the spectacular mountains in Banff National Park and provoked air quality warnings, headaches, and a catch in the throat. More fake weather. Back in July, the winds were blowing east, which is why the Rockies were getting a Calgary, Canada's oil capital. The smoke was so thick that it obscured the city skyline of gleaming glass towers bearing the logos of Shell, BP, Suncor, TransCanada. And the smoke didn't stop there. It kept traveling eastward, reaching well into the center of the continent, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and down to North Dakota and Montana. NASA released a striking picture of the 500-mile plume. Then just as my family was heading to coastal British Columbia, the winds abruptly shifted and started blowing the plume westward, with the Rocky Mountains now acting as giant tennis racket, lobbing the smoke to the Pacific. Inhaling smoke originating from the same incinerated forest the second time in one summer. Never mind that I had traveled 600 miles and crossed provincial boundaries was an eerie experience. I felt like the smudge was somehow stalking me like the smoke monster on Lost. Lauren, would you like to go next?
Thanks, Millie. World on Fire. Part of the head trip in all this is the sheer scale of the disaster, both temporally and spatially. Even devastating hurricanes like Harvey tend to concentrate their impacts in a contained geography. And the event, though not the aftermath, is relatively brief. These fires, which rage for months, are of a different order entirely. There are the direct impacts of the fires, the huge swath of land charred, the tens of thousands of lives overturned by evacuation orders, the lost homes and farms and cattle, the industries, from tourism operators to sawmills, forced to close down. And then there are the less direct impacts of all that wandering smoke. Over July and August, the smoke from this conflagration covered an area spanning roughly 700,000 square miles. That's bigger than all of France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and Portugal combined, all touched by this one fast-moving disaster. And this is just one snapshot of a much larger season of fire. At summer's end, large parts of the American West were on fire. A fire in Los Angeles was the largest ever recorded within the city limits. A fire-related state of emergency was declared for every single county in Washington state. In Montana, a wildfire named the Lodgepole Complex burned some 425 square miles of territory, making it the third largest blaze in the recorded history of the region. This is part of a broader increase in both the number of fires and the months during which they burn. Since the 1970s, fire season in the United States has lengthened by 105 days. According to an analysis by Climate Central, the area of Europe that has burned this fire season has been triple the average, and it's not over yet. Central Portugal experienced the deadliest impacts. In June, more than 60 people died in a blaze near Podregão Grande. Hundreds of homes have burned in Siberia during Chile's summer months. The country battled the largest wildfire in its recorded history, and thousands of people were displaced. In June in South America, the same storm caused flooding in Cape Town and fanned the flames of unprecedented deadly wildfires in nearby towns. Even Greenland, that icy place, saw large and unusual wildfires this summer. Jason Box, a world-renowned climate scientist specializing in the Greenland ice sheet, pointed out that temperatures in Greenland are probably higher than they've been over the last 800 years. Warmer and drier weather is not the only factor at play. Another is the perennially hubristic attempt to re-engineer natural forces far more powerful than we are. Fire is a crucial part of the forest cycle. Left to their own devices, forests burn periodically, clearing the way for new growth and reducing the amount of highly flammable underbrush and old wood, fuel in firefighter parlance. Many indigenous cultures have long used fire as a key part of land care. But in North America, modern forest management has systemically suppressed cyclical fires in order to protect profitable trees that were headed for sawmills, and out of fear that small fires could spread to inhabited areas, and there are more and more inhabited areas. Without regular natural burns, forests are chock full of fuel, provoking fires to burn out of control. And there's a hell of a lot of more fuel as a result of bark beetle infestations, which have left behind huge stands of dry and brittle dead trees. There is compelling evidence that the bark beetle epidemic has been exacerbated by climate change related heat and drought. Anyone want to take over?
I'll go. Thank you. Overlying it all is the uncomplicated fact that hotter, drier weather, which is directly linked to climate change, creates the optimal conditions for wildfires. Indeed, these forces have conspired to turn forests into perfectly laid campfires, with the dry earth acting like balled up newspaper, the dead trees serving as kindling, and the added heat providing the match. Mike Flanagan, a University of Alberta wildfire expert, is blunt. The increase in area burned in Canada is a direct result of human-caused climate change. Next page, thanks. Individual events get a bit more tricky to connect, but the area burned has doubled in Canada since the 1970s as a result of warming temperatures. And according to a 2010 study, fire occurrences in Canada, and according to a 2010 study, fire occurrences in Canada is projected to increase by 75% by the end of the century. Here's the really alarming thing. 2017 was not even an El Nino year, the cyclical natural warming phenomenon that was commonly cited as a key factor in the huge fires that raged in Southern California and Northern Alberta last year. With no El Nino to blame, some media outlets have been willing to drop the hedging. To quote Germany's Deutsche Welle, climate change sets the world on fire. Fairy tales and feedback loops. Looks like snow is coming, Toma declares solemnly, his face pressed up to the window and the white, thick air on the other side. Ever since we left Alberta, his 5-year-old mind has been struggling to understand the smoke that has defined his summer, trying to make sense of my chronic cough and his raging skin rash, struggling most of all with the soundtrack of worried chatter among the grown-ups in his life. His response goes through phases. Nightmares wake him up at night. He writes songs with lyrics like, "Why is everything going wrong?" There's a lot of inappropriate laughter. At first, he was excited by the idea of wildfires, confusing them with campfires and angling for s'mores. Then his grandfather explained that the sun had turned into that weird glowing dot because the forest itself was on fire. He was stricken. What about the animals? We have developed techniques for controlling worry. They begin with taking deep breaths, and we do it several times a day. But it occurs to me that breathing extra amounts of this particular air is probably not great, especially for small lungs already prone to infection. Avi and I don't talk to Toma about climate change, which may seem strange given that I write books about it and Avi directs films about it
and we both spend most of our waking hours focused on the need for a transformative response to the crisis. What we do talk about is pollution, though on a scale Toma can understand, like plastic, and why we have to pick it up and use less of it because it makes the animals sick. Or we look at the exhaust coming out of cars and trucks and talk about how you can get power from the sun and the wind and store it in batteries. A little kid can grasp concepts like these and know exactly what should happen, better than plenty of adults. But the idea that the entire planet has a fever that could get so high that much of life on Earth would be lost in the convulsions, that seems to me too great a burden to ask small children to carry. This summer marks the end of his protection. It isn't a decision I'm proud of, or one that I even remember making. He just heard too many adults obsessing over the strange sky and the real reasons behind the fires, and he finally put it all together. At a playground in the haze, I meet a young mother who offers advice on how to reassure worried kids. She tells hers that the forest fires are a positive part of the cycle of ecosystem renewal. The burning makes way for new growth, which feeds the bears and deer. I nod, feeling like a failed mom, but I also know that she's lying. It's true that fire is a natural part of the life cycle, but the fires currently blotting out the sun in the Pacific Northwest are the opposite. They're part of a planetary death spiral. Many are so hot and intransigent that they are leaving scorched earth behind. The rivers of bright red fire retardant being sprayed from planes are seeping into waterways, posing a threat to fish. And just as my son fears, animals are losing their forested homes. The bigger danger, however, is the carbon being released as the forest burns. 3 weeks after the smoke descended into the coast, we learned that the total annual greenhouse gas emissions for the province of British Columbia has tripled as a result of the fires, and it's still going up. This dramatic increase in emissions is part of what climate scientists mean when they warn about feedback loops. Burning carbon leads to warmer temperatures and long periods without rain, which leads to more fires, which leads to more carbon into the atmosphere, which leads to even warmer and drier conditions and even more fires. Another such lethal feedback loop is playing out with Greenland's wildfires. Fires produce black soot, also known as black carbon, which settles on ice sheets, turning the ice gray or black. Darkened ice absorbs more heat than reflective white ice, which makes the ice melt faster, which leads to sea level rise and the release of huge amounts of methane, which causes more warming and more fires, which in turn create more blackened ice and more melting. So no, I'm not going to tell Toma that fires are a happy part of the life cycle of life. We settle for half-truths and fudging to make the nightmare subside. The animals know how to escape from the fires. They run to the rivers and other forests. We talk about how we need to plant more trees for the animals to come home to. It helps a little. Someone else like to read?
Maria, would you like to pick up here?
Yes, I had to unmute myself. Sorry. A wake-up call for some. One of the regions hit hardest by the fires is a place I have visited often, the territory of the Sipiwimi people, which encompasses a huge swath of land in British Columbia's interior, much of it now on fire. The late Arthur Manuel, a former Sipiwimi chief, was a dear friend and hosted me several times. So far in 2017, I have visited his territory twice, once to attend Manuel's funeral and once for a page, please, for a meeting he had been organizing when heart failure took his life. The gathering was in response to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's decision to approve a $7.4 billion project that would nearly triple the capacity of the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline, which carries high carbon tar sands oils from Alberta through British Columbia. The expanded network of pipes would pass through dozens of waterways on Secwepemc land, what is that, Secwepemc land, I don't know, and is forcefully opposed by many traditional landholders. Arthur believed the struggle has the potential to turn into Standing Rock North. When the fires began this summer, Manuel's friends and family wasted no time making the argument that building more fossil fuel infrastructure as the world burns is both absurd and reckless. A statement was issued by the Secwepemc Working Group on Indigenous Food Sovereignty opposing the pipeline expansion project and demanding that the existing smaller pipeline be shut down immediately to reduce the risk of a catastrophic accident should fire and oil meet. We are in a critical state of emergency dealing with the impacts of climate change, said Secwepemc teacher Dawn Morrison. The health of our families and communities relies heavily on our ability to harvest wild salmon and access clean drinking water, both of which are at risk if the Kinder Morgan pipeline was ruptured or impacted by the fires. This is common sense. When oil and gas infrastructure finds itself in the bullseye of the cumulative effects of burning so much fossil fuel, think of oil rigs battered by superstorms or Houston underwater. We should all do what the Secwepemc did, treat the disaster as a wake-up call about the need to build a safer society fast. Whatever you do, don't talk about oil. Our political and economic systems, however, are not built that way. Indeed, they are built to actively override that kind of survival response. So Kinder Morgan doesn't even bother answering the community's concerns. What's more, the company is gearing up to begin construction on the expansion this month, with the fires still raging. Worse, some extractive industries are actively using the fiery state of emergency to get stuff done that was impossible during normal times. For instance, Taseko Mines has been fighting for years to build a highly contentious open pit gold and copper mine in one of the parts of British Columbia hit hardest by the fires. Fierce opposition among the Secwepemc First Nation has so far successfully fended off the toxic project, resulting in several key regulatory victories. But this July, with several of the impacted Secwats in communities under evacuation order or holding their ground to fight the fire themselves, the outgoing British Columbia government, notorious as a Wild West of political payola, did something extraordinary. In its last week in office, after suffering a humiliating election defeat, the government handed Taseko a raft of permits to move ahead with exploration. It defies compassion that while our people are fighting for our homes and lives, BC issues permits that will destroy more of our land beyond repair, said Russell Myers Ross, a Tsihatok in chief. A representative of the outgoing government responded, I appreciate this may come at a difficult time for you given the wildfire situation affecting some of your communities. Despite the stresses the fires have placed on their people, the Tsihoks are fighting the move in court, and the company has already been forced to suspend its drilling plans in the face of legal troubles. Yet anyone holding out hope that the fires might jolt Prime Minister Justin Trudeau into serious climate action has been gravely disappointed. Canada's Prime Minister loves being photographed frolicking in British Columbia's spectacular wilderness, preferably shirtless, and his wife, Sophie Gregoire, recently unleashed a hurricane of emojis by posting a picture of herself surfing off Vancouver Island. It was during the fires and the sky looked hazy. But for all his gushing about British Columbia's forest and coastal waters, Trudeau is slamming his foot on the accelerator when it comes to pipelines and tar sands expansion. No country would find 173 billion barrels of oil in the ground and just leave them there, he told a cheering crowd of oil and gas executives in Houston in March 2017. He budged since. Never mind that Houston has since been flooded by an unprecedented storm, or that a third of Trudeau's own country is on fire. This month, one of his top ministers said of the Kinder Morgan pipeline approval, "Nothing that's happened since then has changed our mind that this is a good decision." Trudeau is on fossil fuel autopilot, and nothing, it seems, will make him swerve. Then there is President Donald Trump, whose climate crimes are too comprehensive and too layered to delineate here. It does seem worth mentioning, however, that he chose this summer of floods and fires to disband the Federal Advisory Panel assessing the impacts of climate change on the United States and to greenlight Arctic drilling in the Beaufort Sea. Does someone else want to read?
Nance, would you like to read?
I finally figured out how to see both pages at once. So, the guy who lost two houses. It's not just politicians who are bound and determined not to learn from nature's blaring messages. In the midst of British Columbia's fire emergency, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation struck human interest gold. They found a man, Jason Sherman, whose log home burned down in British Columbia, and who also lost a home in the Fort Murray fires 1 year earlier. Two homes, two fires, same guy. The CBC ran photos of his charred properties, separated by 800 miles, side by side. In both cases, only the fireplace and chimney remained. Beep. There's a lot of moving detail in this story about the human wreckage these disasters leave behind, the endless paperwork, traumatic memories, and family stress. But there is no mention of climate change. This is notable because Sherman works as a site advisor or supervisor in the Alberta tar sands. Still, the reporter did not ask Sherman if losing two homes and nearly losing his son raised any questions for him about the industry in which he works. One of the only sectors in Canada or the United States still paying blue-collar salaries that afford middle-class lives. Instead, the tale of a man twice burned played as a quirky human interest story, alongside one about a firefighter who got married amid the flames. When Vice picked up the irresistible story, the reporter did raise climate change with Sherman, which he acknowledged could be one of the factors contributing to these infernos. But in very Vice-like fashion, the bulk of the article focused on how the oil worker is coping with his losses through Baroque body art. The constant pain of a tattoo also makes your mind completely off. Losing everything I own takes your mind. You get used to it. Aren't we all guilty in one way or another of sleepwalking towards apocalypse? The soft focus quality the smoke casts over life here seems to make this collective denial more acute. Here on the coast in August, we all look like sleepwalkers stumbling around, doing our work and errands, having vacations in a thick cloud of smoke, pretending we don't hear the alarm changing in the background, clanging in the background. Smoke, after all, is not fire. It's not flood. It doesn't command your immediate attention or force you to flee. You can live with it, if less if less well. You get used to it. And that's what we do. We paddleboard in the smoke and act like it's mist. We bring beers and ciders to the beach and remark that, on the upside, you barely need sunscreen at all. Sitting on the beach under that fake milk sky, I suddenly flash to those images of families sunning themselves on oil-soaked beaches in the midst of the BP, Deepwater Horizon disaster, and it hits me. They're us, refusing to let a raging, record-breaking wildfire interfere with our family vacation. During disasters, you hear a lot of praise for human resilience, and we are a remarkably resilient species, but that's not always good. It seems a great many of us can get used to almost anything, even the steady annihilation of our own habitat. Next, someone?
I can go. A window to a hacked planet. A week into what a local Sunshine Coast paper has dubbed our days of haze, The Atlantic runs a cheery story headlined, "To Stop Global Warming, Should Humanity Dim the Sky?" The piece focuses on a method often referred to as solar radiation management, which would see sulfur dioxide sprayed into the stratosphere to create a barrier between Earth and the sun, forcibly lowering temperatures. Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, the piece notes, means more governments, including China, are taking sun dimming seriously. The first mention of possible risks comes in paragraph 20, where the journalist quotes a climate scientist saying that hacking the planet could induce droughts or floods or things like that. Yeah, that would be a bummer. In fact, there is a large cache of peer-reviewed research showing that this form of geoengineering could interfere with the monsoons in Asia and Africa, thus threatening the food and water supply for billions of people. Now imagine a scenario in which men like Trump, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and North Korea's supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, were empowered to deploy these climate-altering technologies like unconventional weapons, hurtling us into an era of undeclared weather wars in which one country sacrifices the precipitation of another in order to save its crops, and the other retaliates by unleashing mega floods. Some would-be planet hackers insist that these worst-case risks can be managed, though they never explain how. All concede to lesser downsides, however. Spraying sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere would almost certainly create a permanent milky white haze, making clear blue skies a thing of the past for the entire planet. The haze might well prevent astronomers from seeing the stars and planets clearly, and weaker sunlight could reduce the capacity of solar power generators to produce energy. When you think about this in the abstract, it can seem like a small price to pay to buy some more time to get our act together on pollution control, as the Atlantic article puts it. But it is something else entirely to read about the prospect of deliberately dimming the sun under a sky that is already artificially dimmed with omnipresent smoke, casting a literal pall over daily life. Losing the sky is no small thing. We take it for granted that even in the most crowded of cities, we can look up and see the world beyond our reach. Yes, there are planes and satellites, but beyond that is the heavens, the unknown, the ultimate out there. In almost every corner of the Pacific Northwest this August, when we gazed up at the sky, we didn't see any of that expanse. We just saw ourselves, more detritus of our own broken system. In the blanket of smoke, we had a ceiling, not a sky, and it felt like a suffocating lid placed over possibility itself. I hear myself manically suggesting to Avi that we should just drive north until we hit clean air. And then I remember that if we did, we'd be face to face with rapidly melting permafrost. We stay put. The wind changes. Almost 2 full weeks into the smoke out, something shifts. I hear it first, and then I see branches moving, wind, a sudden temperature drop, and by noon, actual patches of blue separated by clouds. I had forgotten how to see it from haze, higher for starters, and with all kinds of delicate shapes and movement. The smoke hasn't cleared entirely, but enough of it has blown away to suddenly make the world look sharp, crisp. You know that elation when a long fever finally breaks? I feel like that. The next day brings rain, not a lot, but enough to hope for some relief for the 2,400 exhausted and overworked firefighters. My allergies clear up and Toma starts sleeping through the night again. But the news from the interior is disastrous. The same wind that finally pried loose the blanket of smoke on the coast has been fanning the flames at the epicenter of the fires. The stillness that trapped the smoke here for so long turns out to have been the only bright spot for the fire brigades. Now that's over, and there's not nearly enough rain. Over the next week, British Columbia blazes through the record books. By mid-August, the fires break the provincial record for the most land burned in 1 year, 3,453 square miles. Within days, several different fires combine forces to create the largest single fire in British Columbia's history. Too soon. When the solar eclipse arrives, I feel nothing but dread. We have clear skies, a near perfect viewing location, and I know, in theory, that what is about to happen is a natural wonder. But I'm just not ready to say goodbye to the sun again, even for a few minutes. We only just got it back. I spend the eclipse sitting outside alone, staring at the horizon, clinging to the dying light. A week after neo-Nazis marched with torches in Charlottesville, Virginia, and with so much of the world engulfed in actual infernos, this sudden dimming of our world just feels too damn literal. Lee, do you want to take it again from there? Thank you.
Lee, I think you're muted.
Okay, I need to find the spot. I'm sorry. The global fire alarm system?
Yes, it.
The global fire alarm system is broken. Over Labor Day weekend, more than 160 fires are still burning in British Columbia. Extremely hot, dry, and windy weather has conspired to create the conditions for a slew of large new wildfires to ignite and for old ones to expand exponentially. Authorities announced new evacuations daily. At last count, some 60,000 displaced people had registered as evacuees with the Red Cross over the course of the summer. The state of emergency has been extended for the 4th time. But even in Canada, it's impossible for this news to compete with the devastating fallout from Hurricane Harvey, the scores dead and millions impacted by record flooding in South Asia and Nigeria, and now the fury of Hurricane Irma. Then there are headlines grabbing blazes in Los Angeles, the state of emergency in Washington state, and new evacuations ordered from Glacier National Park to northern Manitoba. A satellite image from early September shows the entire length of the continent blanketed in smoke. Fake weather from the Pacific to the storm churning Atlantic. Lauren, did you want to finish that?
Lee, just go ahead. You sound great. So
Okay. I can barely keep track of the nonstop convulsions, and it's my job to do so. I do know this. Our collective house is on fire with every alarm going off simultaneously, clanging desperately for our attention. Will we keep stumbling and wheezing through the low light, acting as if the emergency were not already upon us? Or will the warnings be enough to force many of us to listen, to respond like the Sekwepne, who in a cloud of smoke are nonetheless putting their bodies on the line to stop an oil pipeline from being built on their fire-scarred land? Those are the questions still hanging in the air at the end of this summer of smoke. And then we have the footnotes, which are so grim, I don't know that you want me to read them. The death toll was surpassed just 1 year later in neighboring Greece. Some 100 people died in a series of fires that ripped through coastal lands, starting in Attica, the deadliest fire in modern European history. The remains of a large family were found by a cliff's edge with their limbs entwined. They had clung to each other as the flames approached. Instinctively, seeing the end nearing, they embraced. The head of Greece's Red Cross, Nikos Ekomonopoulos, told a television crew. As was the case in November 2018 in Paradise, California, a town of 27,000 people that was razed to the ground in the deadliest fire in the state's history. 1 year later, in 2018, Trump's now former Interior Secretary used California's record-breaking wildfires to quietly open up new tracts of forest for logging. This was nothing new for Ryan Zinke, who in 2015, while serving as a member of Congress, co-sponsored legislation that threatened environmental protection of public forests. 3 years later, he was still repeating the mantra that deforestation was the best option to curb forest fires. Every year we watch our forests burn, and every year there's a call for action. Yet when action comes and we try to thin forests of dead and dying timbers, or we try to sustainably harvest timber from dense and fire-prone areas, we are attacked with frivolous litigation from radical environmentalists who would rather see forests and communities burn than see a logger in the woods. That could have been me. There is no doubt that California needs both better fire management and water land use policy, but given the indispensable role that trees play in keeping carbon out of the atmosphere, the last thing we should be doing is expanding deforestation in the name of fire prevention. That grim record was broken just 1 year later during the historic fire season of 2018.
Thank you, Lee, and everyone that participated in the reading tonight. Before we go into a collective discussion, we're going to go out into breakout rooms with 2 to 3 people per room for 6 minutes. So I'm going to ask that if you don't want to participate in the breakout room, that you sign off now. That way we get the right amount of number of people in a room so everybody's with someone. But before we set up the breakout rooms, I'm going to ask if Emily could read our community guidelines for discussion.
You got it.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just pull it up here. Okay, community guidelines. 1, we agree not to blame ourselves or others for the misinformation we have learned, but to accept responsibility for not repeating misinformation after we have learned otherwise. 2, we agree to listen respectfully to each other without interruptions. Only one person speaks at a time. 3, we acknowledge that we may be at different stages of learning on the content and discussion topics. 4, we agree that no one should be required or expected to speak for their whole race or gender. We can't, even if we wanted to. 5, we will hold each other's best interest at heart. We hope everyone has come to the table to learn, grow, and share. We will trust that people are doing the best they can. Let's challenge and encourage each other to do better. 6, share responsibility for including all voices in the discussion. If you have a tendency to dominate discussions, try taking a step back. If you tend to stay quiet, try challenging yourself to share ideas so others can learn from you. 7, silence is golden. Sometimes there will be long pauses. Sometimes silence can create space for folks who need that space to come forward. We agree to not fill silences out of discomfort. We will hold this silence with care and move forward intentionally. We welcome those of you whose minds are bursting with ideas to write them in the chat bar. 8, the facilitators are not experts. They are here to help facilitate the process. They and everyone in the group are here to learn. 9, it's okay not to know. Keep in mind that we are all still learning and are bound to make mistakes when approaching a complex task or exploring new ideas. Be open to changing your mind and make space for others to do so as well. 10, the facilitators are not moderators. They are not trained to moderate personal grievances. If discussion stops being about the reading and instead breaches into accusations and aggression, please respect the facilitator switching gears and refocusing on the text. If any of these guidelines are breached, a metabolic team member will reach out to you privately in the chat to provide a reminder. If the guidelines continue to be breached, they will provide a verbal call in. By staying on this Zoom call, you are agreeing to these community guidelines for our discussion period.
Thank you, Emily. And now at this point, I will assign the breakout rooms, and they'll be about 6 minutes long. And throughout the time period, I'll send messages with remaining countdown, and then we'll all return back here as a group discussion. Enjoy. Did it work? Hi, welcome back. It looks like there's still people in breakout rooms, so we'll wait till they all come back.
We pushed return, but just before we realized we were going to be torn viciously out of our breakout room, Ansu was talking about something quite interesting and about the soil moisture. I don't know if you.
Well, it's like the chicken. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Or I don't know how to express that, but you know, Naomi Klein keeps referencing that climate change has caused the heat that has made forests like a tinder box. But climate change itself is really a result of the changes to the terrestrial land cover. It's just a result of the fact that we've removed this whole vegetative layer and replaced it with impervious surface that has desiccated the soils underneath. And if you have trees, you always have transpiration, which is the transport of moisture from the soils up through the leaves and then out. And that acts like a water pump for the more inland areas. So you get constant atmospheric rollover over the surface of vegetation. But if you just have cut the vegetation and you pave it over and you have alternate vegetation like shallow rooted grass, you just don't have that same effect. So the fact is that we've dried out our soils and we've dried out the air above it, and we've broken the whole regional moisture engine. And that's really the cause of climate change, which then positive feedback loop compounds the dryness of the air. So when she blanket refers to climate change, I go, wait a minute, it's more complicated than that.
And Sue, where do you teach?
Have we met before? I think we have, haven't we?
Yes, on here, on this, but I think we've met out on the outside as well.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I remember you. Do you have an adopted daughter, Liz?
Yes, I do.
That's right. We had a
Gabrielle
little
Leno
conversation
daughter.
about that. I don't actually teach, but I've been writing a curriculum that's trying to incorporate more indigenous, particular indigenous California history for the gardens that that I'm part of at the Edwin Markham Middle School in Watts. Yeah, so that's why I've looked particularly into California history, but my background is in geography. I have a master's in geography. So
I would love to connect you with Andy Salas, who is the historian for the Gabriolenos. Yeah,
I would love that. Yeah.
If you have, I'll give you my phone number. You can call.
Let's put it in the chat. Thank you.
That.
Yeah,
Yes.
that would be so nice.
Great.
You know, and I just wanted to say in the Instagram notice about this fire Zoom thing, I put a link in there. I don't know if anybody saw that, but there's a program at Vassar College in New York that's all about this exact topic that we've just been talking about for weeks. And I put this, and it's got a whole bunch of resources and readings and everything. And so it's in the Instagram comments for this this event on.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, let me try to get it. I'll put it in this chat too.
I'm trying to pull it up too and see if I can get in there.
Okay, there it is. Oh, I sent it to Lee and only Lee. I need to send it to Lee. Lee, you're special.
She'll share.
One comment I have is something I really appreciated about this reading that we spoke about in our breakout room was in terms of the writing. I appreciated how there was this broad strokes description of crisis, but also the the kind of the modernity of lived experience, like how do these crises play out in daily lives? What do we tell our children? What don't we tell our children? How do we engage in leisure activities, or how do we deal with this weather as part of our daily life? And I feel like the way she described her family life really grounded that home for me, and I appreciated that. It made it very accessible to me, and I related to it.
I think the line that she said something along the lines of sleepwalking towards an apocalypse was really haunting to me, because we're all aware that climate change is happening, and it's happening at such a rapid pace, and yet the change is so slow to correct all the damage that's being done. And yet we're all aware, but there is that sense that there is a sleepwalking towards it. And that was something that resonated with me in the reading tonight.
Jen, to kind of reply to what you were saying too, I feel like there's a, definitely that feeling of sleepwalking, and also knowing that this was from 2017 and that we're in 2020, and we were talking in our breakout room about the fire in in Orange County right now with the Santa Ana's blowing, and just how I'm sensing a quickening of all of this happening, of the climate change, and an exponential, people are just, the fires are raging, they're getting, more violent, more widespread, more uncontrollable. My family is bracing for their second nor'easter right now in the New York area. And it's been intense, with winds and rain and power going out. And but listening to Naomi Klein, it made me stay tuned in, because her writing is with the personal, political, and compassion. And so I think listening to the compassion for self, and the compassion for the sense of loss, of control, of life, it really kept me engaged. But just to, for me, it was the realization of the exponential quickening since 2017 of all these disasters coming through, including, particularly the fires.
I think that's a really interesting observation, Rochelle. I also have that feeling that the pace of everything that's relating to the sixth mass extinction and climate crisis is palpably increasing. And I think objectively that's accurate. And I don't know, the thing that really struck me about this reading that I hadn't anticipated was her experience with the eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
And like that sense of foreboding. And I traveled to a place that I could see totality, and it made me feel like connected to all the humans that have ever experienced totality, because it's not that common an experience. And it is very intimidating to experience the sun going away, even for a second. And I think that was one of the first pieces of writing where, as a kind of way of explaining it to herself, she connects it to kind of living in that smoke-filled situation and having just been released from it so that she could see the sky, and now she didn't really want it to go away again. I thought that was really an amazing, that'll stay with me for a long time.
I like the fact that she, she called out Justin Trudeau for his politics, because he really talks on the one side of his mouth as if, Canada's a leader in addressing global climate change. And then on the other, he just, is completely stuck in the mindset of the fossil fuel economy, because that's Canada's, biggest global industry and source of revenue. So yeah, very cool that she calls that out.
Yes, we were struck by the quote about being unable to leave a vast quantity of oil in the ground, or the exact opposite of what many of us feel is exactly where it should be. And to think that it was an imperative to remove it. The same as the gentleman in Congress who thinks that clear-cutting forests is an answer to forest fires, and calls it selective forest maintenance. Yes, the economic growth model taking more importance than human well-being into consideration. And it's always the marginalized people, the workers who were sent back to Mexico or Central America with lung problems because they were exposed to fires. It's a nightmare situation of capitalism consuming people as well as resources.
Yeah, I mean, capitalism is just not a model for a relationship with the planet. It's a horrifying nightmare.
Yeah, well put.
We worship false idols. We worship profit.
And as if a bank account value has value, but just like a whole integral experience of living healthy on a planet that can regenerate, has intelligence in its whole system, as if that is worthless, but some monetary value in a bank account is paramount. That's just messed up.
The worship of wealth is why we have the president we have. We don't worship the sanctity and the wonder of nature. Maybe we do, but it's not a common way of viewing things. The value system is at the root of it all, I think. It's in the toilet. So how can we lift that up?
We are undoubtedly going to have a recalibration in the next 12 months of monetary policy, environmental policy, human resources, because the switch over to a Biden administration will undoubtedly yield that kind of recalibration. So we can't lose hope right now that it will change. I'm hopeful.
Maria, I'm also hopeful too, and I'm thinking that due to the pandemic, when so many people have been forced indoors and in seclusion, and we've lost our means of escapism, through art and film and music and et cetera, that many people, including the nuclear families, have come back together to discover nature, because that's
Right.
the only place where we could go. And that's the only place we can go again now. And, I have a lot of friends who have been camping, and like how hard it's been for them to go and get a campsite. And they just see, all of these families of, many ethnicities like out and enjoying and camping and being, I think in a way, because everything, has moved from the indoors to the outdoors. So I'm hopeful that there's going to be some kind of a personal, emotional, experiential, environmental revolution due to the pandemic and due to seeing the sky and the clarity of the blue sky again in Los Angeles, and to being able to see the mountains and the lack of the smog pollution from driving. So I'm just hoping that whatever we are learning during this time of inwardness and insideness, that whatever time we've spent on the outside, that's going to be the thing that sticks, is the appreciation for going there.
I feel similarly. I've thought the same thing, that this pandemic, as awful as it is, has driven us inward to look at ourselves and look at our relationships to the earth and to each other. I hope that this is true.
I mean, I would just like to say you're spot on with that, Rochelle and Maria. And I want to say that it's not this word pandemic, which is human referential, I guess. But I want to say it another way. I want to say that this virus, this being that nature produced, is speaking to us as other beings on the planet, rather clumsy bull in a china shop kind of beings that we are, saying it's invisible. It's got no intelligence, quote unquote, like we do with our superior intelligence, of course. But it's got enough intelligence to say, you're being bad, like, stop.
Yeah.
Reminding us that we're part of an intelligent world, not just a world in which we're the intelligent ones and everything else is just, beneath us existing.
I like that notion of, and I've heard it a couple different times tonight in different ways, the notion of the earth having intelligence and it being an intelligent earth. And it's so true, but it's not something that I feel like I was taught as a young person, or it's not a story or a narrative that has been very dominant in my life, but happens more so now as I engage with environmental issues more and more. But it is a beautiful idea, and I love the kind of decentering that happens when I think about that, when I think about being part of the earth, part of a vast and deeply intelligent network, that we emerged on.
Exactly.
It's beautiful and it's fascinating. And I think it's empowering to try and dig into that idea.
There's an outstanding book by Merlin Sheldrake, which is called Entangled Life. And it's about living systems, self-regenerating systems, and the life of the soil and how it supports the intelligence of those systems. And in one notable vignette, a researcher noted that slime molds have an ability to find their way to food sources faster than he can find his way out of an IKEA. And so they created a model IKEA floor plan and put slime mold in it, put food at the exits, and timed the slime molds on their getting out of the maze, scaling it for size. And indeed, the slime mold beat the human in getting out of IKEA. It's intelligence, it's just a different intelligence that we don't know how to measure and are not, it's like rocks have an intelligence, but it's on geological time. It's not on our European clock. So we don't grasp it. And the fungi and living systems have intelligence that we're unaware of and don't know how to measure, so we can ignore it.
I love that you mentioned that book. When I was working on my previous embroidery, it was the Prince mushrooms. And I wrote to Jen, I was so excited to get the mushrooms because I just come off of reading that book. And I feel like those insights actually gave me kind of like a rush. Like it was like this new way of looking at things and feeling connected. And I also loved that example of the fungi gathering data points from their respective locations and communicating them. And I thought, like, what a powerful model. And now it strikes me that that's kind of how Zoom is allowing us to operate and connect across distance. And we're all feeling similar emotions and reacting to these universal conditions of the pandemic, of the upheavals we've experienced this year. And yeah, it is just so inspiring, the wisdom in the natural world that's there if we take time to appreciate it.
Yeah, I feel like we have to take an extra effort to step outside these cultural and pedagogical narratives that have been drilled into us, in which we're sort of we can look at the world objectively and look at objects as if they're separate from us, and see other forms of life or other beings as sort of not animated and not rational in their own right. And those fungi, those microbes, they have a purpose, they have a rationality, they have their language and reason in their own way. And just because they express it in an anthropomorphic sense doesn't mean that it's any less vital as a building block for this entangled system in which humans are also complicit. So what Emily was saying earlier about it's such a novel sort of mind-shifting perspective. I don't know what it's going to take for the world to start speaking a different way. But I know that is what we need to shift this whole capitalist sort of hypnosis that we're in.
Thank you for that. I was thinking while you were talking, Ansu, about our reading last week where we touched on the idea of disturbance ecology, and we were reading Tending the Wild, and it was in thinking about indigenous fire practices, recognizing that fire had agency not just to help prevent bigger fires, but fire tending had purpose also in facilitating biodiversity. And in thinking about that more this week and talking with some colleagues, I was, recognizing that that we need to kind of redevelop a taste for the complexity of the living world that has biodiversity at its core, because we've lived for so long in a world that has really favored a very reductive palette. So I think that idea of how many different ways there are for life to describe itself, and being able to perceive and advocate for an economic system that isn't just based on supply and demand economics for human consumption, but an interdependent economy where the entire life web benefits from every exchange.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I just wonder, if this narrative can gain in volume and gain in strength and numbers and slowly start to like shift out the other narrative of success being measured by how much you can exclude and control and reduce and control nature's diversity. I don't know, we may need to learn this lesson for many years before we can change our dominant narratives.
Probably going to take place across several disciplines. We're talking about ecological disciplines, but there's economic practices, and I think and there's geopolitical policies, and so it's not only this grassroots or this indigenous knowledge that has to be shifted, but the context of other disciplines are shifting. I think it's pretty interesting that the person who Biden is recommending for economic or for the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, comes from an entirely different position, and she's going to have a hard go of it because she's more of a populist than the Republicans would have us have in that position. But it's not only the discipline of science or ecology, it's many disciplines that have to shift. It's a consciousness shift. If that makes sense? And I think it's going to happen. There's always a shift.
Agreed. I mean, there was this one person who I listened to on Instagram a lot, and it was about transgender people. He's a transgender, or they're a transgender person. And for the first time, I heard this being said this week that, nature's diversity has been falsely, cordoned into this strict sort of gender binary in the human population. And that they said, by the way, transgender people have been here since the dawn of humankind. And it's just that You know, and I thought, yeah, of course, because we're part of nature. You know, there's this whole spectrum of the way in which chromosomes express themselves. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's going to have to come from many different quarters, but hopefully it's happening.
It is happening. Yeah, you can be assured it's happening. And you can also be assured that that there are forces in play that are fighting it from happening as well. That's the balance. We're shifting from a deferential kind of social political system to one of equality. And that's, we thought we were a country based on equality, but we're obviously not. And it's not self-evident that all people are created equal, you know, in the scheme of things and the way politics are driven.
I just want to comment on the fact that the reading was from about 2018, and Naomi Klein was lamenting that the people who are worst impacted by these environmental catastrophes are sort of the most vulnerable, poorer populations working on the resource front, you know, in agricultural fields exposed, not the people sitting in offices. We see that same thing here in 2020 with the virus and, you know, unequal exposure because of the types of work. But then I think we're moving in this direction where it's threatening to collapse our entire economy to such an extent that we are beginning to consider things like universal basic income and addressing the sources of massive inequities in our economic system, which capitalism is designed for. And I think that's kind of a shift that she would not have seen in 2018 when she was writing that we're going to start considering more concrete proposals to have everybody more on a humane footing.
I just want to say that this week has been full of tremendous learning and information. And, you know, Lauren, those two platforms that you participated in brought so much. And, you know, to be among all of you tonight with your heartfelt insights and wisdom is filling my heart. And, you know, and yet it's, yeah, I mean, it's bursting, you know, because of the love of everything. It's a beautiful place that we have. And we, you know, you're also beautiful. So on that, I'm going to say good night.
Thank you for sharing, Roxanne.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Good night.
Good night.
Love you, Roxanne.
Roxanne.
Night. It's been a lovely evening. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you for creating this nice space.
Yeah. Thank you, Lauren.
Oh, we all create it together. So thank you all for holding this space. You know, I do feel like there is something. I kind of think of consciousness a bit like fireflies, and somehow these little Zoom bubbles of consciousness feel like they're more than what they appear to be.
Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful to share this space with all of you and to learn about the Fires of the West and also to be creating at the same time. And if anybody would like to share what they've been working on. I'd love to see.
Ooh. Wait,
Wow.
I need to.
Let me.
Look at that.
Oh, are you doing like little knots?
Who?
You.
You.
Oh, no, but it's the gold thread that's got that texture, so it comes off nice, I think.
Yeah. I had trouble with the metallic thread. Are you finding that it's staying together pretty well?
Well, I had trouble threading it because my eyes aren't good, and it's kind of, it goes into frays, you know. But once I got it on the needle, I love it. It's staying together. Yeah.
So one of the things that I recommend if you're using the metallic thread that worked for me, because I had a horrible time threading it, I took clear nail polish and put it on the end, and then I smashed it a little bit, and I did it on both the front and the back of it, so that way it kind of kept it together. But you can't do it too thick because then you can't get it through the needle. So it's like the delicate balance.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Nail polish.
Have you guys seen those nail threaders? They're like little silver things with the.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't have one, but
yeah, they're really. I can't thread a needle anymore, but those things make it possible to do what mending.
Really?
Yeah. Anyway.
I'll have to look into that.
Cool. They've got this hoop, and so it's a big hoop, and so you just have to put the thread through the hoop, and then the hoop is so thin that you can put that through the needle, and somehow you get thread on the other side.
Well, you have to put it in the needle first, but anyway, I really liked watching women sewing while we were talking about all of this stuff. That was like a really kind of interesting image. So it's so feminine, and then it's like it's also hooks into so many other mythologies and things about, you know, the thread of life and sewing and all that. It's just an interesting image. I did way too much sewing at one point, so I doubt I'll be doing that. I burned out on sewing a long time ago.
And we're being of use. We're actually getting something accomplished. I finished. I'm done.
Wow.
Nice.
Oh, Sylvia, it's beautiful.
Wow.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Wow.
Thank you.
It's charming.
I'll send it in.
Pretty.
Dainty.
Mule fat. Yay, mule fat.
Cool.
What are these little patches going to go in a big piece, or?
No, we think we're just gonna make a book. When we finish this will be the 24th week of us holding space for embroidery and learning. So we did 12 weeks of abolitionist reading and native plant embroidery, and now we're on our 9th out of 12 reading on Fires of the West. So that's 24 weeks of embroidery and conversation. So we think that probably a big handmade book of all of our embroideries, where you can take any one out, but just, you know, a folio, something that could be shown in a museum or be part of a collection, you know. And we're also, actually, Emily and I were going to say, we're putting together a little video about 2020 from the Metabolic Studios perspective. And so we wanted to include some of the embroidery. So we just thought, if people are still working, if you just take an iPhone photo of what, wherever you're at, we can include it in our video.
Yeah, that would be great.
When do you need it by?
Probably like the solstice in another couple weeks.
Okay. All right. Might be finished by then. Be nice.
Yeah.
But we're going to keep going. There'll be another reading, some form of reading coming up in January. And I think we're just going to keep embroidering until we can all go back and hang out together again.
Good idea.
Can't wait.
So, might be a very large book.
Complex story, long book.
I'm just glad to know this new skill. I think I won't be dropping it. I think I'll continue even
Yeah.
after we stop as a group.
Yeah. I can't wait to silk.
Well,
screen.
wonderful. But we have you for another one. So we'll send it next week.
Yeah, Sophia, you're not off the proverbial hook. We'll send you another one.
It'll be in the mail on Monday.
Okay.
Good night, everyone. I've already slid into bed.
Oh, look at you.
Good night.
Late out here. I'm on Eastern time. I'm going to use my good night. Thank you.
Good
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Wait.
Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for a wonderful time.
Everyone.
Take care till we see you again.
Jen, you guys totally did an awesome job.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
Yeah, that was really
It
great.
It was a great reading, and everyone did such a great job. It was a really great team effort.
Everybody did, and it was a wonderful reading as well. Like that, Naomi Klein is just so gifted.
It was
I
beautiful
love the
to
reading.
hear all the voices too. It was really beautiful.
Yeah. It was great.
Good
So
job,
I just
guys.
Excellent, A+. How are you feeling? How are you feeling, Jen?
Well, I'm improving. I found out that my COVID test was negative, so it's just a cold. So I'm relaxed and embracing the cold.
Good.
I
Good.
can tell that you're feeling better, though.
You what?
I think you might be feeling better than the last time I talked to you. I feel like your energy is on the mend.
Yeah, it comes and goes. Whatever this cold is, it's weird. Like I'll have moments where I can breathe, and then all of a sudden I have this like intense feeling like I'm gonna sneeze, and I have a sneezing fit, and then I have congestion. So it can be a cold. I'm happy with it being a cold at this point.
Yeah.
So I'll take it.
Yeah, for sure. How are you, Cindy?
I'm good. My asthma, I think my asthma's been really acting up lately. So that's kind of tough. Like I was practicing reading because I didn't know where I was going to pick up in the reading if I needed to. So I kept reading, and I kept getting winded because I kept getting asthma attacks throughout my reading. So I'm glad I didn't have
to. Working?
I'm on a daily steroid, and I have my rescue inhaler, but I'm going through it pretty quickly in the last like 2 weeks. I've been using the rescue inhaler maybe 5 times a day.
Oh my goodness.
You really want to follow up with your doctor about that. I wouldn't sit on that too long. Because I don't think you're supposed to use a rescue that many times. I know you don't like going.
I know. I don't like going to the doctor. I think I'm just
Maybe
gonna.
you could do a telemedicine thing. I sometimes I just call the doctor. You just talk to them. You know.
Yeah, maybe they don't want to see me anymore. If they can treat me from afar, maybe that's better.
Yeah. I'm sorry you've been struggling with that.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, and plus we have cats. We have a new cat now. We have 2 cats now, and so that probably
exacerbating it.
Mm-hmm. And then the fires. I think this week's fire. It's all messed up.
Yeah.
But I keep all the pets for the kids.
If you ever need one of the days that I'll let you know when I'm at the studio. You can come sit in my Tesla. It has hospital grade oxygen on board.
There you go.
That's so amazing.
It's so crazy. I'm like a junkie. I go in there when it's a smoky day just to breathe.
And it works.
Amazing.
Oxygen.
Yeah, I think Cindy needs a little like oxygen spot in your Tesla.
Yeah. I'm going to be at the moon tomorrow from 2 to 5. You can come drive to the loading dock and have immersive half hour in the Tesla, put some music on.
Yeah.
Swear to God, it is like so crazy effective when you're.
That's so cool.
It's pure hospital grade oxygen that they have on there.
Wow. I had no idea. I had no idea that they come
It's not like automatic, like you have to press a button and ask for it. But it's pretty crazy. They have a little digital fireplace you can have going at the same time too.
I can get oxygen and a fireplace.
That's so cool. Tried that, but now I'm gonna go check it out. Hey, thank God for life's little pleasures in the COVID era.
Yeah.
That's what it's
absolutely.
Clean air and a digital fireplace in your sealed off. Friday Night Live, woohoo!
Oh my God.
Good stuff.
All right, y'all. Well, have a beautiful weekend.
You too.
I'll
see you.
I'll see you, Lauren.
Yeah,
I'm going to see you at
Spanish. We're on for Spanish tomorrow?
Sí. ¿A
All
qué
right.
hora?
Uh,
¿A qué tiempo?
How about 7?
Yeah, that works.
Is that good?
Yeah, we're in COVID lockdown. I'm not going anywhere.
Hasta mañana. You did a great job, Jen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was a great reading. It was wonderful night.
Good night.
So we'll see you tomorrow.